I fixed a woman's car on the way to a blind date, not knowing she was the date I dreaded. The woman standing beside the broken-down car looked like someone who had forgotten how to ask for help. Her hands were trembling, her expensive coat was soaked from the rain, and there was a strange sadness in her eyes that made me stop even though I was already running late for the most uncomfortable evening of my life. I had no idea that the stranger I was about to help was the very woman waiting for me at the restaurant. And I certainly didn't know that by fixing her car that night, I would accidentally repair something inside both of us that neither of us believed could be fixed. If you believe kindness can change someone's life, that second chances are real, and that sometimes strangers arrive at exactly the right moment, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You never know when one small act of kindness might become the beginning of someone's greatest chapter. My name is Daniel, and at 34, I had become very good at avoiding blind dates. Not because I hated women or believed love was impossible, but because the last time I had trusted someone completely, I had watched my entire future collapse in front of me. 3 years earlier, my fiancée, Claire, had left 2 weeks before our wedding. She told me she loved me but wasn't sure she could build a life with someone who was always struggling. At the time, I had been working 2 jobs, repairing cars during the day and delivering food at night, trying desperately to save enough money to open my own small garage. She had called my dreams admirable, but apparently admiration wasn't the same thing as love. After she left, I stopped making plans. I simply went to work, came home, and repeated the same lonely routine. My mother refused to watch me disappear into that routine. She had been quietly trying to introduce me to people for months, and eventually she convinced me to agree to one blind date. She promised the woman was kind, intelligent, independent, and not interested in money or appearances. I reluctantly agreed. The date was supposed to happen at a quiet restaurant across town at 7:30 that Friday evening. I remember looking at myself in the mirror before leaving and wondering why I was even going. I didn't want to start over. Starting over meant risking disappointment again, and I had spent 3 years convincing myself that disappointment was safer than hope. The rain began just as I pulled onto the highway. It wasn't heavy enough to make me turn around, but it made the streets shine beneath the headlights like black glass. I checked the time and realized I was already 10 minutes behind schedule. Then, about 5 miles from the restaurant, I saw hazard lights blinking on the shoulder. A silver sedan sat crooked beside the road, its hood raised. A woman stood beside it, looking helplessly at her phone. I almost kept driving. I actually slowed down, looked at the clock, and told myself someone else would stop. Then I saw the woman step closer to the road, and a truck sped past so close that water splashed across her coat. Something inside me refused to keep going. I pulled over. She looked surprised when I walked toward her. She was probably in her early 30s, with dark hair tied loosely behind her head and rainwater running down her face. She explained that the car had suddenly lost power and wouldn't restart. She had called roadside assistance, but they had given her an estimated wait time of more than an hour. I looked under the hood. The problem became obvious within seconds. A battery terminal had come loose. It wasn't a major repair, but fixing it in the rain wasn't exactly pleasant. I rolled up my sleeves, tightened the connection, cleaned the corrosion as best I could, and asked her to try the ignition. The engine came alive. For the first time, she smiled. It wasn't a glamorous smile. It wasn't the kind people practiced for photographs. It was tired, relieved, almost childlike. She thanked me repeatedly and asked if she could pay me. I refused. She insisted. I refused again. Finally, I told her that if she ever got the chance, she should simply help someone else who needed it. She stared at me for a moment as though I had said something much more important than I intended. Then she asked where I was headed. I told her I was going to a blind date. She laughed softly, almost sadly, and said she was going somewhere she had been dreading all day too. Neither of us realized how strange that sentence would become. We exchanged no names. She got into her car, I got into mine, and we drove in separate directions through the rain. When I arrived at the restaurant, I was 25 minutes late. My mother had already texted me the woman's name earlier, but I had avoided reading it because I didn't want to build expectations. I walked inside, shook the rain from my jacket, and followed the hostess toward a corner table. Then I saw her. The woman from the roadside was sitting alone beneath a warm hanging lamp. The same dark hair. The same tired eyes. The same silver sedan visible through the restaurant window. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then her expression changed. First came surprise. Then disbelief. Then something I couldn't understand. I walked toward the table slowly and finally said her name. Emily? She looked at me and whispered mine. Daniel? The silence between us felt heavier than the rain outside. I sat down. Neither of us knew whether to laugh. Eventually, we did. But beneath the laughter was something else. Fear. Because Emily wasn't just the woman my mother had arranged for me to meet. She was the daughter of the man who had once destroyed my biggest dream. Her father was Richard Hayes, the owner of the largest auto repair chain in the city. 3 years earlier, when I had approached him about investing in my garage, he had laughed at my business plan and told me that men like me didn't build companies. They worked for people who did. A month later, he had opened a massive service center 2 blocks from the location where I had planned to build my shop. His lawyers sent me threatening letters when I tried to compete, claiming my business concept was too similar to theirs. I lost nearly everything. And Emily was his daughter. I felt the old anger returning so quickly that I could almost taste it. She noticed. Her face fell. She told me she knew who I was before she came to the restaurant. Her father had mentioned me years ago. She had heard his version of what happened. Then she admitted something that changed the entire evening. She didn't believe him. Emily explained that she had spent years watching her father crush small businesses because he could. She had argued with him about it repeatedly. She had even left his company after discovering that he had been pressuring independent mechanics into selling their garages for far less than they were worth. That was why she had agreed to the blind date. Not because she expected romance. Because her mother had told her that perhaps she needed to meet someone who understood what it meant to lose everything and still keep going. I didn't know what to say. For the first time, I looked at Emily not as Richard Hayes' daughter, but as a woman carrying her own wounds. She told me her father had never apologized to me because, in his mind, he had done nothing wrong. Then she reached into her purse and placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a copy of an old document. My original business proposal. I recognized it immediately. Emily explained that she had found it in one of her father's files. But there was something written on the last page that I had never seen before. My father had written a note saying that if my garage succeeded, it would become a threat to his company's expansion plans. He hadn't simply dismissed my dream. He had deliberately destroyed it. For 3 years, I had blamed myself. I thought I wasn't talented enough. I thought I wasn't ambitious enough. I thought Claire had left because she saw something broken in me that I couldn't see. But suddenly I realized I had been carrying someone else's cruelty as if it were my own failure. That night, Emily and I talked for hours. Not like 2 strangers on a blind date. Like 2 people finally putting down burdens they had been carrying alone. She told me her father had controlled nearly every decision in her life. Her career, her friendships, even her relationships. She had spent years trying to prove that she wasn't just the daughter of a powerful man. I told her about Claire. I told her how I had stopped trusting people because I was terrified that anyone who got close would eventually decide I wasn't enough. Emily didn't tell me I was wrong. She simply said she understood. The restaurant slowly emptied around us. The rain stopped. And for the first time in years, I found myself laughing without forcing it. But when we walked outside, Emily received a phone call. Her father's name appeared on her screen. She answered. Her expression changed immediately. She listened silently, then looked at me. Her father knew she was with me. And he wasn't happy. He warned her to stay away from me. He reminded her that everything she had came from him. Emily hung up. Her hands were shaking. I expected her to leave. Instead, she looked at me and said that she was tired of living afraid. The following morning, she resigned from her position at her father's company. Then she did something neither of us expected. She used her savings to help me reopen the garage I had abandoned years earlier. Not as charity. As a partnership. It took months. There were permits, repairs, debt, arguments, setbacks, and days when we both wondered whether we had made a terrible mistake. But slowly, the empty building began to feel alive again. The first time we opened the doors, only 3 customers came. The second day, 5 came. A week later, the parking lot was full. People started coming not because we had the biggest building or the fanciest equipment, but because we treated them like people instead of invoices. And somewhere between repairing engines and sharing late-night coffee, Emily and I stopped pretending that what was growing between us was simply friendship. One evening, nearly a year after the night we met beside that broken-down car, Emily and I stood outside the garage watching the sunset. She reminded me that when I first fixed her car, I wouldn't even let her pay me. I smiled and told her I had no idea she would become my business partner. She smiled back and reminded me that I had no idea she would become much more than that. I looked at her and finally understood something I had been too afraid to believe. Sometimes life doesn't send you the person you expect. Sometimes it sends you someone who knows exactly where you are broken because they are carrying their own scars too. And sometimes the stranger you stop for on the side of the road isn't actually a stranger. Sometimes they are the person life has been quietly preparing you to meet. Richard never apologized. But eventually, he visited our garage. He stood quietly near the entrance and watched customers leave with smiles on their faces. He didn't say much. He simply told me that he had been wrong. It wasn't enough to erase the past. But it was enough to close a door that had been open for far too long. And I realized forgiveness wasn't about pretending the pain never happened. It was about refusing to let that pain decide what happened next. Emily and I eventually got married in a small ceremony behind the garage. There were no expensive decorations, no giant crowd, and no perfect fairy tale setting. Just family, friends, warm lights, and the smell of fresh rain. The same kind of rain that had fallen on the night we met. Before the ceremony began, Emily found me standing beside my old toolbox. She smiled and reminded me that the first thing I had ever repaired for her was a car. Then she told me that, somehow, she believed we had spent the last year repairing each other. That sentence stayed with me. Because she was right. I thought I was stopping that night because her car was broken. But maybe I stopped because I was broken too. Maybe kindness isn't always about saving someone else. Sometimes kindness gives 2 wounded people a reason to believe they can begin again. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that second chances exist, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about kindness, hope, and unexpected love. And before you go, I want you to leave one special comment: kindness can change a life. Because somewhere tonight, someone may be standing beside their own broken-down car, believing nobody is coming. And maybe all they need is one person willing to stop. One person willing to help. One person willing to remind them that being broken doesn't mean being finished. Sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin on the side of a road we never planned to travel.